exciting on this beautiful Sunday. Hello, Heather. How are you?
Hello, I'm good. You?
I'm fabulous. I just actually met up with some friends, which was really nice. I
Yeah.
apologize for the slight delay. There was a little bit of traffic going on. So now, we're going to just dive into our topic today. As you guys may be watching, I'm doing 30 Days of Loss and Grief over on my Instagram, and it's also on my YouTube channel. But the one thing that we are going to cover here, Heather and I, today is probably one of the most underrepresented when it comes to loss, I would say. Right, Heather?
Yeah.
And it's losses in the workplace. So the obvious one, of course, is what happens if you lose your job. So we're going to talk about that first, and then we're going to get into some of the other probably more painful ones, but least discussed. So obviously, I mean, I knew I was losing a job once, like I had 2 months notice, and it still bugged me. And why was that? Because a lot of times, sometimes we look at our job as something that's part of us or something that's part of our identity
Yeah.
instead of something that we do, and something that is not core to what our identity is. What are your thoughts on this, Heather?
Yeah, I think that's probably the key when you talk about losing a job, is that one of the reasons it's so painful is because you identify so much with who you are through your job, right? And which is, not necessarily a good thing, not necessarily a bad thing either, but it's hard when you lose a job, especially if it's not your choice, that you've put in so much of what you consider yourself to be, and then all of a sudden you're without that, right? You've lost that. It's almost like a little anchor that's been yanked up, and now you're floating and you're like, where do I go next?
Exactly. And I think some of the important things to throw in there too is, a lot of times you hear about people that retire. And Heather and I have talked about this. What do you call it? It's not anticipatory. We covered that the last time we were here. What do you call it? It's a positive, like a positive thing happens. Voluntary. That's
Voluntary grief. Yeah.
voluntary grief.
Voluntary loss, voluntary grief. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
because the thing is that we can have work friends. It's a joke that we have a work wife or a work husband. We can have people that we spend more time with in the workplace than we do sometimes our own family sometimes.
Yes, exactly.
So, and even if it's things like retiring, which is seen as a good thing, if you're not prepared for, well, who are you lunching with? Or who are you, especially if you're a sweet C kind of people. That's a big difference when people are looking to you for recognition, advancement, you're in a management role. Sometimes it's like being able to help mold and mentor other people can be something that, oh my God, I still want to do that, even though I'm not doing it in the workplace. What do you think about stuff like that?
Yeah, I think that's important. And that's one of the things, as you say, like job loss, everybody's like, oh, or grief in the workplace, everybody just assumes it's job loss. But even something as simple as a promotion can cause a lot of grief, right? Because as I've said many times before, and I will say many times going forward in my life, the best definition I ever heard of grief for me was the one we use with the grief recovery method, which is the change in or loss of a familiar pattern of behavior. And in work, that is the definition sometimes of it, right? You have a pattern, you have a routine. Like you say, there are people that you see every day. You go in at a set time, you leave at a set time. Often, I mean, not every job is like that, but often, for a lot of jobs, there's a routine that you follow every day. You see the same people for lunch. If not every day, then you see the same person on Tuesdays for lunch, the same person on Thursdays for lunch, or you go for drinks every Friday, or whatever that routine is. And when you either shift jobs within a company, or you move to a different job, in a different company, a better job, something that's more in your field, something that you've chosen to go to, that you're not just being let go, you've actually chosen to go somewhere, or you're being promoted, which is, obviously a reward for what you're doing. And everybody expects you to be happy, and you might be happy, but there's still a loss. There's still a loss of stuff surrounding that if you don't acknowledge it, it just accumulates and piles on, and you have those emotional feelings that you're suppressing because you're supposed to be happy about this great thing that's happened to you.
Exactly. Yeah, and I'm going to throw in something that was really an unusual situation, but it also defines, one of the biggest things that I was always taught is that you treat everybody with respect, and it doesn't matter if they're the caretaker or the CEO.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And as I was talking about before, so say you are said CEO, so you're used to people either telling you what you want to hear, or a manager, depending on how you create that workplace, and how good your intuition is sometimes. But when you're in that position, feeling, and there's nothing wrong with having an ego. There's nothing wrong with, oh, this is really good, I'm proud of myself. But the other thing that we never check on, and so I'm going to start with the one story and I'm going to end with another story. This one woman in our company won a large lottery. I mean, a huge one.
Nice.
And she was part of our social committee. She paid her dues. So she left work, not because of the lottery win. The lottery win, she had some other really serious personal challenges that were going on with people that she loved and cared about. So she came to the golf tournament because she paid her dues. She puts her pants on one leg at a time. I couldn't believe. Now, if you've ever been to a corporate golf tournament, everybody gets a prize. It's like a carny. Everybody gets a prize, even if it's golf balls. So you get your door prize, and she won a prize, and the gossip about, oh, look at her, she doesn't need that. And it's sort of like, that's us putting our own stuff. And I think that's another thing about emotional processing. That may be, because maybe you are, you have jealousy, envy, all those not so pleasant emotions. And, there's nothing wrong with going, hey, but if you can't get to the place where you say, you paid your dues, just like all of us did, that money goes to paying for this golf tournament, everybody's entitled to be there. So that's story number one. That was, I thought, really interesting, because the reason she left left full time was not a pleasant reason. And it's like, to see that kind of input was really quite disheartening. So the second one is that we get promoted because we work hard, we do our job well, technically we're fabulous. And now those people that we used to have lunch with every day are the people that report into us.
Yeah.
And it changes the dynamic. But the funny thing is, and I've seen this in a number of different situations over the years, long before I was doing any of this grief recovery, it's like, oh, well, they're not doing too well in this leadership role. And it's like, well, how are we mentoring that person to feel comfortable in their own shoes? And we do a lot of trial by fire.
Yeah.
But we don't, we think that when we go to work, we separate this, we're this unfeeling. We don't have any feelings, because that's not professional. And as I say to some of the people that I work with, I'm here to remind you that you're human. And there's nothing wrong with being sad that you can't have lunch with these people, because maybe you can't even talk about the same thing. Maybe they want to bitch about you. Who knows? Our lunch is different things for different reasons. What are your thoughts on this, Heather?
No, I think that's very true. That's one of the hardest things with something like a promotion or a job change in any fashion, even if it's just a lateral move, not an upwards move. If the job changes, the people change around you, there's going to be a change in how you feel, and and again, there's always that conflicting emotion of the happy to have the promotion, but sad to lose all the other things. And you're going to have new things that come with the promotion, and there'll be different people, or they'll be the same people. Maybe they're coming with you, who knows, right? But it's having that ability to acknowledge both sides. And I think so often, and you talk about the folks that were, gossiping about the woman who had left, as human beings, we're so good as a collective and as individuals of comparing, right?
Mhm.
And I think as an individual in the job situation, when your job changes, even if it's for the better, we tell ourselves that we're not allowed to feel bad, right? Because this was a good thing. This was a promotion. This was great. It's easy to feel bad if you've lost your job, right? It's easy to feel bad, to feel angry, to feel sad, to whatever that brings up for you. It's easy to do that because you've lost the job, and there's a reason to feel bad, right? Whereas, and I think that the opposite is true for losing a job. You're not allowed to feel good that you lost the job, right? You're not allowed to feel happy because you hated it and they got rid of you, right? And again, it's that you're not allowed to feel bad because you got a promotion, and you don't want to tell anybody that you feel bad because you got a promotion, because you also feel happy, but you just, you're not allowed to acknowledge that negative emotion. And that's the hardest thing, I think, with loss in the job, in the workplace, because you're either supposed to be happy about something that happens, or you're supposed to be angry because it happened, and you're not allowed to be both at the same time.
And that's exactly it. I think it's, the greatest challenge in the workplace is that we are human. We do
Yeah.
bring our human emotions there. And, then you get, the whole projection thing and stuff like that, which is part of the human experience. But, one of the last areas is say you have a falling out with somebody at work.
Yeah.
It's not quite like you break up with your spouse or something, because you don't have to see them at work. And work is sometimes that wonderful place that's a, that's a reprieve from home life.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the whole thing, is we don't really know. We are multifaceted beings.
Yes.
And I think that, even if you start developing language as a manager, or even as a coworker, sometimes somebody comes in, maybe they're acting a little different. And it's just like, hey, how are you doing? And you create a place of safety, because we can also be having a bad time at home and still be able to come into work and do an awesome job, because technically we're good. But on the other hand, when we use work as what we call a STIRB in the grief recovery method, which is a distraction. So maybe home life isn't going so well. Maybe, you've got emotional challenges there, and you're burying yourself in work. And then the whole North American thing, like, it's really funny that we have to develop a thing, this quiet quitting, that it's like at 5 o'clock, you turn off your phone. And it's like, there should be nothing wrong with you turning off the phone at 5 o'clock, because you are paid from 9 to 5. Even if, you get a salary, and sometimes the amount of time you're actually working is crazy.
Exactly.
And so we all have our choices to make when it comes that way. But as a leader, like a true leader, acknowledging that sometimes emotionally, what is it? I think the cost of a grieving person being in the workplace is in the billions of dollars.
Right.
For a spouse or somebody in our inner circle. I think it was $11 billion. This study was done through the grief recovery method. And that was done how long ago? Turn of the century. So early 2000s.
Yeah.
The loss of a pet is $4 billion. And these studies were done on over, I think, 50,000 people that had been through the grief recovery method. And they asked them, how many times were you unavailable emotionally, and that you made a poor choice or a poor decision that cost your company money?
Right.
So these are the kinds of questions that were asked. And it's amazing at what we will do not to talk about our feelings, even if we have EAP programs, even if we have, therapy, because therapy, in my experience, therapy doesn't do half a quarter as good as the grief recovery method, but you do have to be prepared to emotionally get comfortable with yourself, right?
Yeah.
And so that in the end makes you a better leader. It makes you a better coworker. So you're actually doing a community service. And one of the things I would love to see is to get this kind of program subsidized by employers, where, say there's also a death of a coworker, and a beloved coworker. That affects everybody in the office.
Yeah.
And for the week after we talk about it, but isn't it common? We're seeing it all right now with, Queen Elizabeth. It's a big thing right now, but soon it's gonna go away. It doesn't mean that people aren't still coming to terms with the emotional impact of somebody they didn't even know. And this isn't talking about our day-to-day work life. What do you think? I know I'm going off on a few tangents, but what else is new? So.
No, and I agree. I would love to see people be able to really kind of express how they feel at the workplace, and not so much, I mean, yes, it'd be great if they could express how they feel about their personal life at the workplace, but I get it. If you want to like leave your baggage at the door, as common saying, and that's fine, and come in and do your work. But it would be nice if it was if the workplace had a safe place to acknowledge those conflicting feelings around work things, even, right? Like, because as I said, you get the promotion and everybody's like, woohoo, that's great, yay, yay, yay. And you're like, yes, and in the back of your mind, you're like, yes, it's great, but I really want to have lunch with Joe on Tuesday, and now I can't because he's my employee. Like, he's my subordinate. And, those kind of things, right? But you don't get to express those emotions in most workplaces. And kudos to anybody who's in a workplace that you can do that. It's fabulous, and stay there and keep that job. But yeah, I think it would be great, and I think, as you say, like productivity would be tenfold if people were allowed to have those. And it's not to say that you're gonna express those feelings and dwell on it. It's just to be able to express that and kind of let it pass through, and let it be said, let it be heard, let yourself deal with it, let yourself process it, and then move into all of the great, wonderful new stuff that you're going to get in a job promotion or a lateral move or a switch to a new career or whatever it is. But if you ignore the negative and push it down, as with any negative emotion that you push down, it just gets buried and it stays there, and it doesn't, digs its own little weeds in the garden and spreads and, sits in the background until eventually it comes back up. But it would be nice for a workplace to be able to acknowledge those, and to acknowledge both sides. Because I think there's a lot of places where you don't even get to acknowledge the good, right? It's, you get, even if it is, you get a promotion and they're like, here's the promotion and yada, yada, yada. And it's like, okay, thanks. But that's it, right? It's like, here's the promotion, here's the extra work. And you don't get to enjoy the moment of being promoted, right? So.
Agreed. And again, I know we've already hit we're good. We still have a few more minutes, because I would like to bring in one other area when our emotionality gets involved in the workplace. And I know that I'm unusual with this, but I think a lot of this comes because one of the other things that I want to look at is the way we frame things. That's my NLP practitioner language coming out. The way we frame things, the way that we emotionally tell a story to ourselves affects how we show up emotionally,
right,
supportively. And this comes down to applying for jobs. And you get people,
yes.
I hate job interviews. I hate, and this kind of stuff. And I love them. I love them because I want, how can we best use a reflection of what's going on without somebody else asking us, hopefully, interesting questions, right? Because they're also professionals. But especially if, say you're going for a job within your organization, and you go for that interview and it doesn't work out. Maybe there's somebody else. When we are, we're getting into that area of hopes, dreams, and expectations, which we could probably do a whole show on just how that comes into it. But
Yeah.
if those expectations are not discussed, if those hopes, it's like, yeah, I'd really like to be the manager. I think I've worked really well. Well, there's a million different things that go on, personality types. Yes, there's technical knowledge. Yes, you're a hard worker, but that's not the be all and end all, right? When it comes to building a management team, or, a little bit of what you said before, if you are in a place that encourages emotional conversations, emotional intelligence is actually coveted. That's a great place to be and stay there. Well, sometimes our growth, and I'm going to throw a little example of this in from somebody that I knew that was a perfectionist, and I'm sure there's quite a few of us out there. And that is, she went for a job interview for a job she didn't want, and she didn't get offered it, and she got so upset. So this is the opposite side of things. But when it comes to that, it's like, so my whole thing is, well, but you didn't want the job. Well, that's the point. So when we manage our own, and I'm not talking manage like I'm a manager and I'm putting on this non-feeling, non-thinking hat. When we get to know our emotional landscape, when we know it's like, why am I getting so wrapped up in this? What's at the bottom of this?
Yeah. Why is it important?
Exactly. So that's like the last area that I'd like to just ponder and get your thoughts on. What do you think about that, Heather?
No, I think that's pretty common. And I think the other extreme is also true. You get a lot of people who don't apply for jobs because they're afraid of what they'll be told, right? They're afraid that it's something that they really want and they won't get it, or that kind of thing, right? So, the other side of her applying for something she didn't want and going for the interview, but getting annoyed when she didn't get it. But I think there's a lot of times when people don't, because as you say, they've told themselves a story, right? And instead of just kind of taking the leap and seeing what's out there and seeing, and taking the feedback that they get, maybe they don't get the job, but you get the feedback from why you didn't get the job, and go from there, and perhaps next time, right? But there's a lot of times people don't do that because they're afraid that they're gonna hear that they're not going to get it, and then that means that they're terrible and awful and whatever, right? Whatever story they've told themselves, right? So I think that's a big one for people. It's as you say, finding that ability to look at your emotional state and figure out why it is you're feeling that way, and what's behind it, and what's motivating it, and then what can you do to move through that. So not past it. You're not moving past anything. You're moving through, right? So.
Exactly. So now we apply the grief recovery method to maybe a dysfunctional parent relationship that had us, and you don't even understand that insecurity, or that, why aren't I going, like, I think that's one of the biggest aha moments that I had through the grief recovery method was, why aren't I going for my MBA? Why? And then it comes back to a relationship with my father, and part of his mental illness was, threatening suicide. So, but he also told me specifically, take care of the family, take care of everybody. And this I took to heart because I'm learning this at 5 years old. But and so does that mean that I wasn't okay? Like I didn't handle the relationship with my father? I did. But by doing this, it's a different way to look at our relationships, a structured process. And then it's like, then you just go, oh my God. And it's almost organic that these boundaries or these aha moments where it's like, and you just know, well, that's why I wasn't going.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
So that's the thing that's great, because you can be in therapy for years and still not get to the crux of something because you're looking at this instead of
the big picture. Yeah, exactly.
So
exactly.
So
it's very true.
So this has been, I know it's 5:06, so we're now up at around the half-hour mark, but thank you, Heather.
Thank you.
Again, we start tomorrow. We have a grief recovery session. We still have some openings
Do.
there. So it starts tomorrow night. It's an 8-week program, and you have tomorrow or the next week is the last time, because it is simple, but it's emotionally challenging. You need to step up and put your heart first and foremost out of anything in your life. So it does take a commitment on your part. And I know that I love watching people open up their heart, or at least learn something more about themselves concretely. And that's a neat thing. It's not the same thing for every person.
Yes.
It's different depending on what you need. And that's
Exactly.
the wonderful part. So we'll see you tomorrow night if you're joining us. Well, the people that are joining us, they're going to see us. And Heather, I'll see you tomorrow night. And next week, we have Aisha. We're going to talk about family estrangement from a communication standpoint. But again, I already took that on with the 30 days of loss and grief, because again, the main thing that I like to focus on is normalizing the conversation around loss, grief, death, and dying. So death and dying are not the only things for loss. And I hope that you've seen that through today's conversation, that there's many different ways that normal day-to-day activities are diminished or overlooked when it comes to our emotional landscape. So
and some of those losses in those day-to-day things, even though they're not a death, are just as or more so impactful on a person. So
yeah,
for sure.
And I have to be grateful, because it was a bully in the workplace that led to me having my big aha, whatever, breakthrough, whatever you want to call it, because I couldn't allow somebody else to bully people. Anyways, that's a whole other conversation. So thank you, Heather, co-facilitator extraordinaire, and we shall see you tomorrow night. And I love you guys. Have a great day. If you have any questions, post them down below, and I'll put the link for Heather to be able to contact her if you're interested in joining this group that starts tomorrow. Have a great day, everybody. Enjoy the rest of the weekend.
Bye.
Bye.